So, Justin, when we broke, you had basically outlined for us the experiment that started in 2012 when Sam Brownback, governor of Kansas, brought in the famed Arthur Laffer, he of the Laffer curve, which purports to show that at one point, if you increase taxes or have a higher marginal tax rate, that wealthy people and money will simply stop being productive because it's not worth their while to make those dollars over a certain threshold because they'd only be getting 65 cents on the dollar instead of 90 cents on the dollar or whatever it was. So he pays Arthur Laffer to come in and advise how we can cut taxes in Kansas to finally show, now that we have this experiment, that when you cut taxes, what you're actually doing is creating more tax revenue because you're spurring so much economic growth. They managed to get their entire package through, every single thing on their wish list of detaxifying, if you will, Kansas. And then what happens to tax revenue?
Pretty much right off the bat, in a matter of 1 or 2 years, tax revenue fell off by about $750 million. And that in itself just created this instant budget crisis for the state legislature where they were forced to start borrowing more and more money to sweep away funds that were for public education, for the state highway fund, for the state workers' retirement pension fund. So they were sweeping away all this money that's meant for all these other state obligations and putting that basically to just plugging the hole that all these tax cuts blew in the budget. And so it just instantly threw the state into fiscal chaos. And both Moody's and the S&P downgraded the state's economic outlook, stating the kind of perpetual state of budget chaos as a reason for downgrading. So it did, if anything, it may have made the wealthy a little bit more wealthier by giving them about $1,000 to $2,000 of additional revenue a month. So a pretty big tax break for the wealthy, but they were not using that money to create jobs. They're using that money to just go on a nicer vacation or whatever. And then the 5 years after 2012, in the wake of the tax cuts, Kansas job growth was just lagging far behind the national average, about 5 percentage points behind the national average. So that's kind of the scope of what happened.
And we should say, not only is it lagging against the national average, but it's also lagging against its neighbors, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of employment, in terms of the growth rates, and we should say that we had a situation too where in 2016. Brownback realizes there's these huge budget shortfalls. They begin to shift the taxes to consumption, the sales tax, as well as slashing, like you say, slashing all sorts of government programs, and including things like education. And so we have, compared to Nebraska, let's say, Kansas is doing worse. It lags behind in non-farm payroll employment. It lags behind in terms of all sorts of, frankly, other jobs. I mean, there's no area where Kansas is outperforming its neighbors or the country. And in fact, in all of these areas, it's lagging, except for, I guess, in how quickly they're cutting what people like about government.
Right.